It looks like we are back. Okay, welcome. If you were following along on part one, we're gonna finish working on this RT12 amp and bring it back to life. So, I was mentioning in my earlier session, I scavenged some parts off this board to fix another amp. And I did that while I was waiting to figure out the value of the resistors that were on the amp board. So I couldn't identify what these 4 resistors were, and we went over that in part 1. And so while I was waiting, I scavenged some parts off of that to fix another amp. And I thought I ordered those parts, and I did not. So they are ordered, and I will have some spares on the way. But I did mention that it was important to have a graveyard. And here we go. So this is similar to an RT. I don't know exactly which model this amp comes out of, but the functionality of it is the same. This might not be a Klipsch amp. This might be a different brand, but they all kind of share the same amps. Anybody that made a subwoofer in that time typically used bash as their amplifier source. So JBL, Harman Kardon, a bunch of different brands use the bash amps. So in this one, this has our resistor that we need. It actually has 2 of them, so we got 2 shots. We can get one of those out of there, and we should be able to pop it back in here. I use this specifically as a testing fixture. I use it to check the power supply boards. I made a little pigtail here where I can plug them in quickly and check them after I do a repair, make sure it's good before I actually solder it back into the board. And the same with these bash modules. So I put a socket on there, and I can swap these in and out. After I do a repair on the board, I can test the board, make sure it's good. If it tests good, then I can put it back into the original amp. It saves a ton of time. I've had it before where I'll miss a diode on the board, and I'll solder it all back in. Something's not working. I gotta desolder it again, take it out, risk damaging the through holes. It's just not worth it. So you put a socket on the board. I can test them. It saves a bunch of time. I know I'm putting a good part back in the amp, and if there's still issues with it, then I can pop it back out and find those and fix them. So it's a nifty little trick, but the thing that sucks is you have to have a board to test them in. So you have to either sacrifice an amp, or you have to be lucky enough to actually find a power supply. This one actually came to me in a box. I don't know if it was somebody else that was doing repairs or for whatever reason, but he had a whole bunch of just random power supplies from amplifiers in a box, and I fixed an amp for him, and he said, "Hey, you want these?" And I said, "Sure." And none of them worked, and you can see on this one, there was a problem with the bash control board that had to come out. The FETs needed to be replaced, and we had some burned traces on this side. I had to scrape all of the coating off, and I retinned all these traces, and then I had to scab in a little wire here to replace this trace. I usually try to, I don't do point to point unless I absolutely have to. You can do it that way. I don't think it's as clean of a job. Like this kind of follows the original path of the original trace. You don't have to do it that way. I just prefer to do it that way. It makes it easier to follow the circuit and, maintain the originality of the board. Just personal preference, I guess. You could take a piece of insulated wire and run it from anywhere on this track to this point, or to this one, or basically anywhere where those tie in. But there might have been a reason that they did it this way in the original layout. So I think by duplicating that, you might save some headaches. And I mean, it would work, but you might have a noise issue. You might have, who knows. Sometimes weird reasons are chosen for doing these things. So I'm going to fire up the Weller. And we are gonna take this resistor out. Almost all of these have bent leads. It's super annoying, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You have to just deal with it. It's part of the process. And you know, I wish I understand why they do it. I just wish they didn't. It just makes it such a pain to get some of these parts out. And almost every single one of them, you know, they're gonna be bent. Some of them are severe where it's folded all the way over onto the board. Some of them are not too bad to where you can get the desoldering tool on there. So let's get this part out of here. We'll measure it to make sure that it's within spec, and then we will put it into the customer board. The iron's almost hot. I don't know, what is this? Is this an iron? Is it a gun? It's not a gun because there's no trigger to it, so I guess it's an iron. But this guy right here, the DXV80 by Weller, best desoldering tool that you can buy in my opinion. I've used a bunch of different ones. I mean, they just work. This is my workhorse right here. And this was an eBay special along with the controller for the WRS1002. I bought it broken on eBay. I fixed it, and now I have the baddest of the bad desoldering tools at a very reasonable price. And that's the main selling point, is I didn't pay a fortune for it. You know, I really would like to have one of the newer style Hakko units, the pistol grip style, but I don't want to spend $700 on a soldering station. Like, there's just really no reason for it. So, first step, I have a smaller tip in there. This is a number 2 tip. First step is we're going to bend the leads. So we're going to, you know, put some solder on them, leaded solder, and we're going to get in there with the tool, and we're just going to straighten the leads out. That is going to make it infinitely easier to get these out. We'll heat them. Hit the magic button. And it'll still be a little tricky to get out because the leads still do have a little bit of bend to them, but we'll get it. And there it is. A perfectly scavenged part. No damage to the board it came from, no damage to the part that came out. So I'll put my tester supply into the graveyard, put a note on him that he needs to be fixed, and I robbed a resistor from him. And let's see what she reads. $68.32. Good enough for me. And we still have to address the shorted FETs. So we're going to pull those out one at a time and find out which one's shorted. These are sometimes a pain to get back into. You just kind of got to do the little dance. And by the way, I hate thermal paste. Like, I don't understand why they use so much of this, but these amps are just covered in thermal paste. It's everywhere. It's all over the FETs. It's usually all over the board. Come on, camera, focus there for me. But I'm so tired of just getting thermal paste all over everything. You don't need a lot of thermal paste. Thermal paste is only meant to fill voids between the two surfaces. I mean, these things have a gallon of thermal paste on them. It'll be all over the board, all over the legs of the components. Like, I understand they're like assembled in a factory, like at a rapid pace, but just stop. It gets everywhere. It's hard to wash off. I'm a big fan of silicone pads. They might not be as efficient, but they don't make a mess. And like my work pad down here is a silicone pad. When that silicone grease gets on there, it doesn't want to come off. So we can use the welder to solder too. So we'll seat that resistor in there. Make sure we push them down to the board without using my fingers. There we go. Do it one more time. He's on an angle. Alright, nice and flush. Tack the other leg in. Alright, then we'll go back to the first leg. And it's in. Looks like factory, minus the flux that's around the legs of the resistor. Not bad. Alright, now we gotta address this short. When we powered it on for a test, we had full output. We don't want full output. We want 8 volts. So I will ohm these out. You can do it with an ohm meter. You don't have to do it with continuity. I just like hearing the beep. It's easier. So we're at 8 ohms. 8 ohms is no good. We got a 50-50 shot of getting it right, but I'm still going to replace both of them. I do have plenty of FETs stocked up in my little bin here. So, you know, I almost grabbed that and got that stuff all over my hands. When you're doing these, it's best to heat it up and heat it until you see the solder melt on the other side of the leg, so you know it went through the entire via. And just give them a light little wiggle up and down, just kind of clear the residuals, and out it comes. So let's test this guy and see if he is the culprit or not. And it could be both. We'll do continuity this time. Shorted. Well, let's do the other one while we're at it. Not shorted. Now theoretically you could leave this one in. It would still function, you know, just fine, but we're already this far into it. You know, a $2 FET really isn't gonna make or break the day, so you might as well just pull it out. Put 2 good ones in there, 2 matched good ones, because these do share current. There might be some minor discrepancies between manufacturers. Especially depending on where you buy your parts. I would highly recommend not buying components for repairing things on Amazon or eBay. AliExpress, Alibaba, anything like that, like, just don't do it. You're going to get a fake part, and it's going to wreck your day. So let's grab 2 new ones. These are internal rectifier IRF 640Ns. What are these? OEMs. Can't read it. Here's a little trick. If you cannot read the writing that's on a FET, get a Q-tip, take some of the thermal paste on there and just rub it on the top of the part. Give it a good rub, and then wipe it off. This is also an old school internal rectifier IRF 640, but it's going to be hard to see on the camera because the part's so small, but the lettering pops and you can read it because the white silicone thermal paste, went into the little grooves in there, made it readable. Here's another little tool. I probably didn't put this one in the description, but this is another great tool that you want to have. And my light's going to drown it out, but this is a Euro tool, fiber scratch pen. And it's just a little fiberglass insert in here, but it works wonders for cleaning off pads. So I'm going to take, I just removed this part here, and the pads are kind of gnarly because they're old and dirty, and they oxidize a little bit. Just take this Euro tool and just real lightly go over these pads. You don't have to push hard. You're just kind of dragging it over the top of the pads, and these things will come out shiny like they were brand new. I mean, what a difference it makes when you go to solder it too. The solder wicks better. It's great. The only thing that does suck about these is it is fiberglass fibers, and they will get stuck in your finger, and they do itch. So keep that in mind. Alright, we'll recycle our Q-tip. We're using the non-silicone end just to get any of the little fibers off of there. Alright. 2 new FETs going in. FET 1, FET 2. Yeah, it looks like my dog's coming to say hello. Let's see if I can get Juno on camera real quick. See if we can catch her coming through the door. Hi, dog. Come here. Come here. Nope, she's gonna go lay down. She likes to hang out when we're soldering. Alright, here's another little trick. If you're gonna be replacing capacitors, you're going to need a way to measure these things. They're all in metric, so the best way I've found is just to have a cheap little plastic ruler. But this also serves another function too. So when you're replacing FETs, you want them to all be nicely lined up. Well, it's real easy to line them up. If you just toss your ruler in there and align it with the 2 fixed ones, and then you can just tack one of your legs on one of the other ones, and then just push them into place, and they're all in a nice straight perfect line just like they were from the factory. And especially when you go to put the heat sinks on, that makes a big difference. So it's another little hack. As Davey 504 would say, that's a hack. I don't know if any of you guys watch him. He's a bass player, YouTube bass player, and his videos are mildly entertaining. I like watching his stuff. And I'll give a shout out to Paul Daniels too. I like watching his videos, and it was really him and Luis Rossman that got me into doing this. Like, I've been doing it for a while, and I never really thought about doing it on video. I've had a lot of people ask me, like, what did you do to my amp? How did you fix it? And, you know, they always have questions, you know, when you're fixing something for somebody. And, you know, it's hard to explain, but it makes kind of sense to document it, because now I can just say, oh, well, here you go. Why don't you check out this video? This is exactly what I did to it. This is how I got it working. This is what I found was wrong. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this. All right, we will solder these back in. Then we will check for shorts. And then we will clean the board. Shut my irons off. I always shut my irons off. You can leave them on, but the tips tend to wear out a little bit faster. So we got a good solder. They're relatively straight. The two that I put in are straighter than the factory ones, so we'll call that good. Let's see where we stand with short circuit now. Open. That was me touching the leads. Alright, we're reading open on both. And I'm not going to trim the leads on these because they're well below the standoff height. Make it easier for the next guy to get out. Alright, give it a little look. Make sure I didn't steal any other parts off this board. Board looks good. I have Q11 wrote down, but it does not look like I took Q11 off of this, which means I think I just blew Q11 on another board and ended up replacing it on that one. Alright. We will grab our death leads and plug this guy in. You know, make sure the power's off. You know, I'm always going to recommend safety. You know, you're using this is 120 volts right here. Took to a switch and a light bulb, so it's current limited. But you know, make sure your power's off. Don't be messing around and plugging things in when you got juice going to it. All right. No screws. We're going to wind up our solder and get that out of the way. Solder under a board is not good when you're going to power it on. Put our ruler away. I'm usually never good with putting stuff away, so one of the benefits of having a smaller bench is I don't have a lot of workspace to work, so I have to be like excessively organized. Alright, let's go to voltage. Bring the meter in so we can see what's going on. And we're going to check CD+. We'll just set him there. If anybody does want to know, these are probe master probes, and I like them. I just like them because they have the really nice silicone flexi leads on them. They seem to work pretty good. There's a bazillion different test leads out there. I just always use these, so I kind of stick with what I know. Alright, let's flip the switch and see what we get. Hopefully no pops or bangs. And there we go, 8 volts. So this supply is back alive, it is happy, and it is ready to be put back in. So we will disconnect our leads that are powered off. We're going to flip the board and we're going to drain our caps with my cap drainer 5000. And you only got to drain the main tank caps. I mean, you could drain them all if you want, but typically under 50 volts, you don't really have to worry about it. I believe 50 volts is, actually I think it's lower now. I think it used to be 50, now it's like 42 or something like that. That's the safe working voltage. But most of these will bleed themselves off over time. And even the big ones, they have drain resistors on them. Not always, but on this one they do. On the sub 10s and sub 12s, those do not. So when you're working with the 100 volt cap on the secondary supply, that thing is always charged. And it holds its charge for a very long time. So I'm just going to go through and just give it a little wipe down, get some of the flux residue off. If it's really bad, I'll hit it with the spray bottle and a toothbrush. I'm trying to be a little conservative just so I don't wreck my bench right away. I got a new desk too. I don't know why I bought a desk. I should have just built something out of some cheap plywood, but I went out and actually bought a desk to use as a workbench. Now I'm like terrified to ruin it because it's a nice desk, even though I know it's going to eventually get ruined anyways. But I'll try and turn the overhead camera and give a shot of the workbench just so you can kind of see what it takes to get involved with some of this stuff. These boards are never cleaned from the factory too, so you don't have to go too crazy with them. I mean, there's usually always solder residue all over the board, and there you go, right there. See that? Thermal paste. All over my hands. You can't avoid it. I probably could wear gloves. That would help. But then my hands would be all sweaty and probably run into all sorts of other problems, so I'm not doing it. I'll just continue to cry about getting silicone stuff all over me. A little bit of dawn and it comes off, but that doesn't make it any less annoying. Alright, clean enough. We will take the resistors that were bad, and we will throw those with our two FETs that are bad. And those will end up in the garbage. Yeah, I could save the one FET, but I have a whole bin full of like gently used FETs I don't need anymore. And I only reuse them in like my repairs for like lab stuff when I'm testing, so they don't get used that often. And I don't feel comfortable putting used semiconductors into somebody else's amp. Used passives, resistors, and capacitors and inductors, not a problem, but I don't know, when you're putting a MOSFET that's probably been abused into somebody's amp, it just doesn't sit right with me. It probably wouldn't matter. I mean, a working device is a working device, but it's just better to put new parts in. Plus, the new ones are typically lead-free, which means that, I'm saving the environment a little bit by using better parts, I guess. Alright. Get all the Q-tip fur out of there. Board is somewhat cleaned up. We will pop him back into his home. Everybody always sends the leads with these things too. I don't know if these have it or not. These don't. Do these? These don't either. A lot of the Klipsch leads, right inside here on the connector, there's a little locking tab. And you can yank on these things until your fingers hurt and they won't come out. You actually have to like push the locking tab in and then pull them out. I can't tell you how many amps that I've had sent to me that have the wire ripped out of here and there's just a connector on there. I mean, I understand, like, you know, people don't really do this often, so they don't know, but it still kind of sucks when you have to replace connectors that didn't normally need to be replaced. So there's still plenty of thermal gook left on there. And here, I'll be nice, because I'm sure somebody's gonna say, oh, but it's not gonna cool now. So I will take some. Here. I'll even give it a shot of some new stuff. You gotta remember though, less is more. Very little, very light coating. You're only trying to fill in the voids. You're not trying to glue it to the heatsink. Alright. These are kind of a pain too, just because of the way the heatsink is. Like, instead of putting two discrete heat sinks on these, they just put this big horseshoe piece on here. So you have to bend the fets out of the way, slide the board in, you know, not knock out the little ceramic insulators when you're doing it, and then piece it back in. It's, I don't know, it's not the way I would have done it. Plus, it's always a pain to get them lined up. I definitely would have done it differently. Alright, let me clean off my tweezers so I don't get this goop everywhere. And I got it everywhere because I used the paper towel that I had the parts wrapped in. And I'm out of paper towels. I'll have to stock up tomorrow. These tweezers right here, I don't know where I got them from. They're Cettex, C-E-T-T-E-X. They're stainless steel, but they're magnetic stainless steel. So if you put a high-powered magnet to them, you could use them to pull the legs of through-hole parts through the board, and we'll go over that. These things are awesome. Get a pair of those tweezers. Alright, let's put the board on. And we're just going to screw the board to the plate, assuming that this is good. And to do that, I'm going to use like my 1935 Stanley screwdriver. I don't know if there's a model on it, but this was my great-grandfather's screwdriver. Actually, there is. It is a number 2 Phillips. Alloy steel. I love this thing. Like, my great-grandpa was an electrician, and he used it, and it got passed down to me somehow, and now I use it, and it's my favorite screwdriver. And not only because it was his, I like it because the tip on it just doesn't ever wear out. Like, it's made out of some kind of space-age metal or something. Like, it's the only screwdriver I've ever owned that I've used for everything. I mean, I've used it for drywall screws. I've used it to, you know, do stuff like this. And it still works. And it still doesn't, you know, lose its edge. It grabs them and doesn't strip screws, which is what a screwdriver should do. Now, I put them all in loose because the plates never align properly. So we're going to start loose with all of them. And then we'll torque them down. And these boards are always warped. There. Nothing you can do about it. Not good for the board either, but still nothing you can do about it. Alright. That guy's an extra. Plastic ones are always a pain. I usually just put a little pressure on these to kind of bend it over. That way it doesn't turn. Don't put these too tight. They don't need to be super tight. The metal ones hold it in place. Sometimes you do have to grab them with a pair of pliers, like this one's being a little stubborn. Well, there we go, I got it. And if you break those standoffs, you can replace them. I found 100 of them on Amazon. They're just 10 millimeter plastic PCB standoffs. You can find them pretty much anywhere. Online, that is. Good luck finding them in a store. Alright. Let's tighten up our brass screws now. And the reason we don't tighten the brass ones first is because the plastic ones wiggle a little bit. You want to make sure you get the screws started in those, so then all of them line up before you torque them down. Okay, and we are missing a ceramic plate, so we will put that in there. But we're going to test it first without the heat sinks installed. Because if we have to pull the board out again, I don't want to have to go through all that work of redoing all of these screws and all of the heat sinks. Alright, so here's a point where you have to kind of be careful and keep an eye on what you're doing here. So these are your speaker leads coming out. Then you have power leads. Okay, you have two that go to the board, power supply board, and then you have two that go to the amp board. So they're all labeled. CD plus is always red, CD minus is black. Klipsch has a wonderful cable management system of just throwing everything into a bundle and zip tying it. You know, they couldn't just shorten the leads to make them fit nicely. They had to zip tie them together. Actually, that's not Klipsch. I shouldn't blame Klipsch. That's Bash. Klipsch makes boxes and drivers. Bash makes these amps. And I am a Klipsch fan. I do like their products. I think they make, you know, for the price points that you pay, they make a great system. The RSW15 is still probably one of the more powerful subs that you can get. 1000 watt amp into a 15-inch driver, that'll make some noise. That'll bring the house down. Alright, we are going to slide this back. Make sure that our FETs are not shorted, not touching any of the plate. Let's zoom out a little bit. Alright. Limited space, but we're making it work. Alright, I am going to grab the input board and the LCD. So, let's put my screwdriver away. Get my test leads out of the way. Try not to get wrapped up in my microphone cord. If anybody knows a good Bluetooth headset or ear set for streaming, please tell me. I want to go wireless. I do not like having a wire attached to my face. It sucks. Alright. So first test is always going to be just power on. We want to make sure that all the supplies are working. We know that the amp supply is working because we had 8 volts, but we need to know if the plus minus 15 supplies are working. So the easiest way to check that is to see if you get your display to turn on. I wouldn't hook a speaker up at this point or any input. Make sure that your speaker ends are insulated and not shorted. Here's an easy way to do it. Put a knot in one of them. Now they can't ever touch. Keep them out of the way. And give it a once over. So we have our ribbon cable coming out of our amplifier board going to the feature board. Then we have another ribbon cable going from the feature board to LCD display. This is not my testing LCD display. This was sent actually with this whole setup. Now, typically I don't take these power supplies unless I get the input board. I don't really need the LCD unless they have an issue with the LCD. They're fairly easy to fix. And I have a ton of spares for these available, so I really just, don't need them. But I think we're ready. Everything's clear. Make sure there's no metal on our bench. We're good. Alright, here we go. Let's see if we get something on the display. And we get nothing. And you know why we get nothing? Because we don't have power going to our amp. So let's power up our amp. And by the way, these leads, don't leave these things just floating around in your bench. That's a terrible thing to do. I have clips that each one of these go in that holds them apart and away from me. They should be insulated. I'm gonna put a set of insulated terminals on there. I have the insulated ones. I should just put them on there. Be safe. Be safe when you're doing this stuff. Okay, here we go. Let's try again. We have power going in. Let's flip our switch. And there you go. Now see, this is what we want to see. We want to see that the volume is at 26 dB or below. One, because my wife is sleeping right now, and if I had an input hooked up to this and a subwoofer connected, and it's at like 0 dB, she's going to come down here and stab me. So, make sure your volumes are low. One, because you don't want to ruin your woofer or your test speaker, and two, just because, it'll scare the hell out of you. So we have our low volume. And one thing I found about these is you have to when you turn the volume down, you have to turn the power switch off and leave it off for like 5 minutes before it actually sets into memory. I have not figured that out. I don't understand why, but that's the way it is, and that's how it works. So keep that in mind if you are going to do a test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this off. And I'm going to take an input. Now I have a function generator, and my function generator feeds into a couple of RCAs through a splitter, and I usually test at 40 Hertz. So we will go to line in, and we will hook up my test woofer. Here's another thing that is always a pain. Now, I get some amps that have the wires on them, and I get some amps that have the wires off. So my test woofer has the female spade connectors on it. So that's kind of always a pain. So you can slide the little insulated jacket back. You could jam them in there. You could use alligator clips. There's a few different ways to do it. I like just jamming them in there underneath the silicone. It's not ideal, but I mean, we're not testing at super high levels here. If the sub gives you a nice clean tone at, you know, low volume in free air, it's going to sound fine in the woofer. You don't need to crank it up to, you know, window shattering levels to verify that it's good. Alright, so we have function generator on, we have speaker connected. Let's give it some power. And even at low levels I can hear it. We have woofage. Now my test driver's blown. It's just a cheap driver out of an old Logitech Z5500. I have a spare, but this one actually still works, so I'm going to use it as is. Plus I can test it at low levels, and when I get the buzz I know it works. So I have a really nice, clean, clear bass tone. And that's what I'm looking for. So you don't want to hear any sort of buzzing, hum, distortion. You want to, you know, I'm feeding it a pure sine wave at 40 hertz. I want to hear a pure sine wave at 40 hertz. I don't have an easy way to show you a scope output. Otherwise I would hook it up. Maybe I'll get one of those little cheap breadboard scope kits off of Amazon, and then I could just set it on the bench and show you a scoped output of the speaker. But just from experience, I could tell that the sound coming out of the woofer is a nice, clean 40 hertz sine wave. And that's pretty much it. This amp is repaired. I'm going to power it down. I'm going to secure the FETs in there, and you know, I don't want to leave it running too long because the FETs aren't on the heatsink right now. So we'll power it down. Take our volume back down to mute. Power it down. All that we have left on this one is I'm going to take some silicone and I'm going to blob in between the caps. I'm going to blob in between the cap and the transformer, and where the corrosion was on the board, I'm going to throw a nice little blob down under there. There are two leads. Let me unhook these speaker leads here. There are two leads that are soldered together, and it's going to be hard to see. I can zoom back in. Let's try and zoom back in and see if we can see these here. Right here. These guys are just soldered together off the board. And I'm sure it was a design change, like a running design change at some point, but it doesn't hurt to secure those. So I'll throw just a blob of silicone on there, and I will show you the silicone that I use. GE Advanced Silicone, 100% silicone. Just your Home Depot special. It is 2. I find this one seems to work great for all of this stuff. There is some debate on whether 1 or 2 is better, and I think it has something to do with one has ammonia in it, and I don't know, it has to do with how they cure, but silicone 2 is better for this type of stuff, and this is what I use, and I haven't had any issues with it. It also doesn't get nasty and turn brown and short out components, so that's what I recommend. So any of the big caps need to be secured. So I'll throw a blob here, throw a blob here between the cap and the transformer. I throw a blob here between the dashboard, the inductor, and this cap. I throw a blob back here between the bridge rectifier, and the heatsink. Probably throw a blob into here too, just to stabilize that heatsink a little more. This heatsink was moved. They're normally pointing up. I believe they're on this side. When I'm cleaning all the gunk off the boards and replacing these caps, I move this heatsink to the other side. There's just more room for it over here. It seems to fit better, and it still functions. There's a lot of free air space right here where it can still cool. So that's how I do it. It seems to be better. I can secure it to the board. It's not floating up in the air. It's not stressing the legs out on the bridge rectifier. So that's how I do it. Other than that, as soon as the silicone is cured, it's ready to box up and get on its way back to its owner and the original sub that it was in. So I appreciate you guys following along. I hope I can do some more of these repairs for everybody, and go through some different amps. I know I have sub 10s, sub 12s, RW10s, RW10Ds. I have some Sunfire stuff. I have some Velodyne stuff. I know the digital drive Velodynes, there's probably a lot of interest in repairing those. They're frequently broken. I have not yet found a way to fix the sensor that's in the woofer. The accelerometer sensor, but I would like to experiment with that and see if we can find a way to fix those. So I appreciate anybody that was watching this or will watch this, and if you want to like and subscribe and follow me, I'll be doing more of these videos for everyone. Any questions, I will try to answer as many questions as I can, down in the feedback area, and hopefully I can help some of you guys fix your amps. Alright. Until next time.